Dasheen or taro is a tropical plant usually grown for its root vegetable, but in Trinidad and Tobago we use the leaves in many of our dishes. These leaves can be cooked similar to spinach, but it can never be eaten raw. This is because of the high concentration of oxalic acid that it contains, so it must be cooked properly before consuming. For those wanting to add this to your morning smoothie, please reconsider. In Trinidad and Tobago, the leaves are simply called bush, Bhaji or callaloo bush. In other parts of the world, it's called taro leaves, elephant ears, kalo, luau leaves, and poi. These leaves are extremely healthy. They deliver large amounts of vitamin A, B, and C, which gives a boost to the immune system. Girls, it's really healthy for fetal development also, so listen to your Ajee and Nani and your Tanti when they tell you to eat plenty Bhaji, especially when you're pregnant. And don't worry, the baby won't come out looking like Chewbacca despite the rumors. Today I'm cooking this simple but delicious Bhaji. For this recipe, the young Dasheen bush leaves and stems are used because they're much softer and they cook quickly. The larger leaves are used for the popular and delicious street food sahina. Here, Umesh is cutting the young Dasheen bush leaves, and he's well clothed to prevent the oxalic acid from touching his skin, as it's really toxic and it causes burns and severe itching. Thank you so much to Dasheen Bush by K&I for providing the Dasheen bush used in today's episode. Check them out on Facebook and watch the recent video I made on them for more information. To start, make sure you get the nice young bright green leaves and stems. And make sure it's not too yellow or brown because most likely it's diseased or nutrient deficient and you'll want all the nutrients, right? Wear gloves or liberally rub oil or lime juice all over your hands before touching the leaves. In my 18 years of cooking Bhaji, it has never bothered me, so I just never took extra precautions. Next, I like separating the leaves from the stems. Of course, we have to wash the leaves. First, I like to give them a nice soak in the sink, and then I wash each leaf separately and then place them into a basin. Do you notice how the water beads up and runs off the leaves? It's ironic that the Dasheen plant loves water, but the leaves are so resistant to it. They're super hydrophobic, meaning that they're extra resistant to water. But the beads of water that fall on the leaves, they grab onto the dirt and then they roll off, essentially cleaning the leaves. And this water resistance actually prevents the plants from getting bacteria when they're out in the field. And you know bacteria is usually present in moisture, so that's why they're so resistant to liquid. You know how those neglected veggies in the fridge develop mold? It's the same concept. Notice this fancy pointed tip at the top of the leaf? This is where most of the oxalic acid is concentrated. And you can remove it if you want, but when you cook the leaves, the toxin is released. It's said that adding calcium carbonate also helps to remove the toxins quicker. Can we just pause and look at how intricate those needle-like calcium oxalate crystals are? Beautiful but deadly. To chop the leaves, I have two methods. The first way is to layer the leaves one on top of the other, face side down. Then I grab the entire stack and start chopping. The second way is how most people do it. Individually wrap the leaves and hold them side by side while you chop. Choose the method that's easier for you. Now let's work on the stems. Break the discolored ends off and peel that fibrous layer to reveal the tender stalk inside. Now hold a bunch of them together and just chop them into smaller pieces. Add it to a basin of water to prevent it from oxidizing or changing color. And these stems are high in fiber and they contain beta-carotene, calcium and iron, so make sure you use it once it looks healthy. The stems are also high in the toxin oxalic acid. Notice how it's staining the chopping board? My mom usually never wears gloves, but since she's babysitting my nephew, she's extra careful in the kitchen now. We don't want that acid to touch his tender, sensitive skin. To chunky, I have onion, garlic, pimento peppers, and hot peppers. And today I'm making a large batch to take back to New York. But in the description box below, I'll leave the measurements for a smaller amount of bhaji. To chunky, I'm going in with some oil first. And now that the oil is nice and hot, I'm adding the chopped onions. Once the onions start to soften and turn translucent, now add the garlic. As you can see, I'm a huge fan of garlic. I think that's why I never get sick. Garlic has so many medicinal properties, and I think that's why our ancestors used to cook with so much of it, because they knew it was a natural medicine. Now add the hot peppers and the pimento peppers and saute for about a minute and a half. And you can add some curry leaves or carapilla leaves in there to amp up the flavor. At this point, you'll want to lower the heat all the way down because we essentially want the bhaji to steam in its own liquids. So I'm adding just quarter of the total amount of Dasheen Bush, because I know it looks like a lot, but that's how bhaji is. It melts all the way down once it starts to cook. And I'm salting it at this point also, but I'll taste it when it's nearly finished. Remember what I told you all about the toxic acid, right? So be careful. Give it a good stir and put the lid on to let it steam low and slow. It's been about 10 minutes and you see how quick it melted? Now that gives me some space to add some more. I'm gonna continue doing this until I get all the leaves and stems in there. This is about 8 to 10 large bundles of bhaji, so I'm gonna give my mother-in-law some. I'm eating some for lunch today, and then I'm gonna take the rest back with me to New York. So I just have to make some dal and rice when I'm ready to recook it. Now that the last set is in, I'm covering it and letting it steam for the next 15 minutes. And if you're adding coconut milk, now is a good time. So it's been about 15 minutes, all the bhaji has melted nicely, and one thing I'd like to mention is if you're using the mature leaves, it's gonna take much longer to cook. And I know if you're based outside of the Caribbean, chances are you'll get the mature leaves because sometimes we just have to use what is accessible to us, right? There's only one store in New York where I get the young leaves and stems, so I don't always cook this. So if you're using the mature, the hard leaves, add a teaspoon of baking powder or a quarter teaspoon of baking soda, and it should help to melt the leaves. And you can add it to callaloo also if the bhaji isn't melting. So you don't need to have the young leaves. If you can only get the mature leaves, then use that. Now I like to use the dhal ghutney to swizzle up the bhaji into a smoother texture. But here na, I couldn't even find a dhal ghutney in my parents' house. So I asked them if this is even a Trinbagonian household, because how do they even swizzle dal? And then my dad said they pressure cook the dal, so there's no swizzling involved. So I'm actually using the swizzle stick that they use to make chocolate tea. So if your tea tasted like bhaji that day, then here's the proof. I'm just swizzling until it's a nice smooth texture. Of course, if you like it chunky, then this step is optional. I even use the potato masher because I'm still confused as to where this dhal ghutney disappeared to. You can also use an immersion or stick blender, or wait for it to cool and blend it in the food processor or the blender. But that's real work, so just forget I said that. Now that it's been cooking with the cover off and most of the liquid has reduced, but the bhaji still has a nice moist but not a watery consistency, I added some chopped shadow beni or bandhania, but for some reason that footage didn't make it. Taste for salt now and turn the heat off. Remember, it's gonna thicken as it cools, so if you like it a bit more moist, then leave a little bit of liquid in it when you turn it off, so it's gonna stay a little bit moist. Now the bhaji is ready to be served. This is usually eaten with dal and rice and sarnied or eaten with your hands. I think that the food is much sweeter that way. And if you're a carnivore like my husband and you need to have some meat on the side, make some fried fish or curry chicken or even some kongs and aloo like how I'm eating it today. Growing up, my mom always paired bhaji with curry shrimp. They're a match made in heaven. And a nice piece of mango achar or some kuchela or even some murtani or pepper choka will top off the dish. So enjoy your bhaji how you like it, with roti or with rice. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the Dasheen Bush Bhagi recipe. Leave me all your comments below and your feedback. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing and hit the little bell next to the subscribe button so you'll be notified of all the videos that I post. And make sure you check out Dasheen Bush by K&I for some of the yummiest Dasheen Bush Bhagi. Until next time, bye!